Hello, what is going on, guys? Tuxco here. Welcome back to another Brawl Stars video. Today, we're going to be doing another video that was suggested, and it's very similar to the one where I ranked all the Brawlers based on if they had both star powers at the same time. We're doing it if both gadgets could be used at the same time. Now, because star powers are basically base traits, they're going to be active the whole time. Gadgets are a little bit different because you have to press a green button in order to activate it. So this is how it's going to work. Both gadgets will be able to be used in the same game. Both gadgets will have 3 uses. The gadget gear will be incompatible, meaning it cannot be used. So both gadgets will have 3 uses, and they can be used simultaneously. So there's no cooldown amongst both of them. If you press one, the other one doesn't have a cooldown. You can use them both at the same time if you wanted to. Obviously, there'll still be the cooldown for the gadget you choose, but you can use both gadgets at the same time if you wanted to. So we're going to be ranking all 84 brawlers in the game based on if both gadgets could be used. And I feel like majority of it honestly won't change because a lot of the gadgets kind of contradict each other in a way. And there's also some really bad gadgets that provide no value. But without further ado, one quick announcement. Please make sure to check out the Next Gen's channel. Link in the description below if you want to rank this yourself. I'll also have a link to the tier list in the description as well. But yeah, without further ado, let's just start into the ranking, starting off with Shelly. Shelly has Fast Forward and Clay Pigeons. Clay Pigeons is a must-have on Shelly. It turns her into a sharpshooter. And Fast Forward is kind of a mediocre gadget. Now, it will help her a little bit because if she has that situation where she's kind of far away and she needs to dash in a little bit and get her super off, sure, but majority of the time you want to use Clay Pigeons. And if you're using the Shell Shock star power, you can slow them and pretty much get confirmed kills with Clay Pigeons. So I don't really think Shelly's going to benefit too much because Fast Forward is not a good gadget on her. So it will help her a little bit, but it won't be that much of an impact. Next up we have Colt. And Colt has 2 really good gadgets. He's got Speed Loader and he's got Silver Bullet. Silver Bullet is good for opening up the map, and Speed Loader is good for just bursting down a lot of damage. Now, on the right map, I feel like you won't really need Silver Bullet as much, but on a map where you want to break open some crucial walls and reload, it's going to be a lot of value from Colt because Colt's just going to be able to spam out a lot of damage and open up the map how he prefers it, which is why I think this is such a deadly combo. And I will give Colt A tier for that. I don't think it's completely S tier, but it's going to be a very good combination. The amount of DPS he can put out, along with the amount of control he can deal with his Silver Bullet gadget, is just going to be very strong. Next up, we have Brock. And Brock kind of has a similar mechanic as to Colt, where he can control the map with his Rocket Fuel gadget, but he also can defend himself because he has Rocket Laces. Now, it's kind of good, just like Colt. He doesn't have the damage output like Colt does, but at least he has a way to defend himself. Because the thing about Brock is anything aggressive-wise, anything that gets in his mid-range can kind of counter him. But with the Rocket Laces gadget, if they get up close and too personal, Brock can gadget them. He can gadget away, knock them back, and pretty much provide protection for himself. So I don't think it's completely as good as Colt, but definitely B tier because the ability to control the map. Next up, we have Jessie, and Jessie is a dangerous combo now that I think about it. If you use both gadgets at the same time with a turret, that's guaranteed kills because you're going to be slowing down the enemy and then dealing double the damage. The enemy is going to get cooked. There's just no way you're going to avoid it if Jessie just throws the turret on top of you. Now, if you take the turret out, yeah, you're fine. But then just imagine a hypercharged turret with both the gadgets. No, you're cooked. You're donezo. So just because it does rely both on her super, I can't give it S tier, but I could definitely give this one an A tier. That combo will be deadly. Next up we have Nita. And Nita has 2 gadgets that also rely on her super, and they're really not crazy broken synergy wise. You've got the stun one and then the shield one, which gives her pretty much impossible to kill Bear if you land that stun off and then put a shield on it. But really, I feel like you don't need both of the gadgets on Nita. And also, they both rely on Bruce. So I'll give it B tier just because they both benefit from her super, kind of like Jessie. But I don't think it's going to be that great. Next up, we have Dynamite. And Dynamite has one of the best gadgets in the game, Essential Charge. but also one of the worst gadgets in the game in Fidget Spinner. Fidget Spinner is a horrible gadget. Now, it will give him a little bit of extra DPS if a dynamite hits, and it does deal a lot of damage, but most of the time, you're never going to hit it. So, it's going to be D tier. It's not completely useless, but it's not good. Next up, we have Primo. And Primo has two just gadgets. They're not like crazy good by any means, but they're not terrible. And he's got Suplex Supplement. He can throw the Brawler over his head. And then he also has Asteroid Belt, which drops a meteor, will open up the map. You don't really want to open the map up with Primo. Maybe if he has a good team synergy and you can yeet the player into the meteor and deal some insane damage. Otherwise, I don't see this being very valuable, so I'm going to put him in the D tier as well. Next up, we have Bull. And Bull has T-Bone Injector, which gives him like 2,000 healing by the click of a green button. And then he's got Stomper, which is an absolutely essential gadget for Bull. So he needs that gadget in his kit already. And then T-Bone Injector is just whatever. It's good for healing because you'll be able to at least use the healing when he uses the Stomper gadget. So I'll give him a little bit of value, but I don't think it's not enough healing for a tank. So I'll put him in the C tier. Next up, we have Rico. And Rico, I think, could be A tier at least for me. You could even argue S tier. I have to think about this logically. Rico has Multi-Ball Launcher, which completely counters his counters, which is aggression, by the click of a green button. And if you're going to die to a long-range brawler, you can literally just pop Bouncy Castle and basically freaking heal back up to full HP with the press of a green button. He's going to cover so much map control, and he's going to be so hard to kill because he has his best counters, which is aggro, are just going to get deleted by Multi-Ball Launcher. And then if people outrange him, he can just pop his gadget and continue to play aggressive because he's just going to constantly heal up from his attacks. I'm putting Rico in the S tier. I think the combination of his gadgets are way too strong. Next up, we have Barley. And Barley is another brawler that could be easily in the A tier because he's got his Herbal Tonic gadget, which slows down enemies around him, which pretty much makes anything aggro either trade with Barley or Barley will beat. And then he also has his tremendous healing from his other gadget, which I actually think I mixed up the gadgets. Herbal Tonic is the healing one. Sticky Syrup Mixer is the slowing one. My apologies for that. But just a combination for that to counter his counters, which is aggression, and also heal up his whole team, including himself, that's kind of broken. Because he has two of one of the best gadgets in the game, in my opinion. So I'm putting him in the S tier as well. Next up, we have Poco. And Poco has two good gadgets as well. He's got Tuning Fork, which is good on Poco Double Tank. It's just good for healing up his team and himself. But also in the right situation, you have his other gadget, Protective Tunes, which will stop anything. Slows, stuns, poisons, any of that all gets stopped for 4 seconds. And it's a decent gadget. It's only good in the right circumstance. But now that you can heal and also prevent that, decent combo. It's just that Protective Tunes is a very situational gadget because not every brawler has a slow, stun, or knockback. So I'll put him in the C tier though. Next up we have Mortis. And Mortis has two gadgets that pretty much give him extra DPS in a way. He's got Combo Spinner, which will give him a spin that deals damage, and then he also has his other gadget, Survival Shovel, which will give him more damage and faster reload. So very strong combination, and then combining them both, he's just going to deal extra damage and charge his super. Now, it's not like crazy broken, but I'll give him B tier just because the extra damage potential is crazy. Next up, we have Bo. And Bo has, Loki, two really bad gadgets. He's got Super Totem, which is good compared with Kit, and combined with Kit, sorry, and good for tanking one shot, which majority of the people use. And then Tripwire is good for opening up the map, but you almost never hit it because it's got a 1.5 second delay. It's a pretty long delay. Bo's gadgets are kind of bad, so I'm putting him in the D tier. Like, it'll help him ever so slightly. Next up, we have Spike, and Spike has Plant Life, which is a really good gadget, and then Popping Pincushion, which is, it's like okay, but it's not that great. It's really only good in Heist, because it's good against anything aggressive, but Spike kind of counters that in a way because he has a super, and he also has his quick burst damage, which you can just delete anything aggressive and tanks. So Spike is squishy and gets countered by long range, and Plant Life is good to counter that, but combined-wise, it's not really going to do much. So I'll put him in the C tier. Next up, we have Crow. And Crow has two alright gadgets. He's got Slowing Toxin, which still slows for a good 2.5 seconds, I believe. And then he's got his Defense Booster, which gives him a 40% shield. So he'll be able to survive a little bit longer and also chip away by taking less damage. And he also has a Star Power, which reduces the damage from the enemy, which will help him out a little bit. I don't see it being that great, though. His gadgets are kind of mediocre now, so I'm going to put him in the C tier. Next up, we have Piper. And Piper has two so freaking annoying gadgets. She's got Auto Aimer, which basically counters her counters, which is aggression. And then you also have Homemade Recipe, which confirms a kill almost every single time. Two very, very powerful gadgets. Piper is going to be so pretty much uncounterable, because with both of the gadgets, she's going to be able to defend herself easily, and then also confirm kills easily. How are you going to stop this brawler? You can't. I have to put her in the S tier as well. It's just too good. Next up, we have Pam. And Pam has one gadget and one really good gadget, which is really good against anything aggressive. Pam right now as a brawler is terrible, but with her Scrap Sucker gadget, she at least can delete anything aggressive and tanks, because she removes all the ammo and can burst out. Her Pulse Modulator gadget gives good healing for a turret, but not great. So I'll give her in the C tier, but it's like not going to change her that much. Next up, we have Tara. And Tara has gadgets that kind of contradict each other, because both of them can look in the grass, but one literally spawns pets that can search the grass not only, but also can deal damage and tank for her, while her other gadget just gives her the ability to look in grass. So it's not really going to change too much for her, because her Psychic Enhancer gadget is just a worse version of her Supports from Beyond gadget. So it's D tier. Like, it'll help her so slightly, but nothing crazy. Next up, we have Daryl's gadgets. And low-key, I'm putting this in the F tier. Daryl's gadgets are so bad. Both of them are bad. Daryl, as a brawler, literally would not change at all without his gadgets. He's got his Recoiling Rotator, which gives him some chip damage and extra supercharge rate. Who cares? Does not that much damage to the high safe. Like 9,000 if you hit all shots, which is a lot of damage, but you'll never hit all of the shots. And then his Tar Barrel gives him a slow around him. When you roll onto a brawler, you won't need that slow, because Daryl has the knockback and also deals a crap ton of damage. So even without Tar Barrel, they're still going to kill the brawler. So Daryl will not benefit at all from having both gadgets. Next up, we have Penny. And Penny has a good gadget in Salty Barrel, and then Trusty Spyglass, which is honestly a terrible gadget, because it's pretty easy to dodge Penny's shots. And yes, like if you press this green button, anybody that's in the turret range will get shot at, but most of the time you're going to dodge it. But there's a bit of value, but nothing too crazy. Next up, we have Frank. And Frank has two good gadgets. He's got Irresistible Attraction, which prevents him from his weakness, which is getting canceled out of his super. So that'll help with that. And then he also has Irresistible Retraction, which not only will pull the enemy closer to him, allowing him to pretty much hit every attack, but it also deals 50% extra damage. So I think combined, it's a decent build. So I'll give him B tier. Next up, we have Leon. And Leon has he's got a really good gadget in the Lollipop Drop. Good for team synergy, good for controlling the map. And then he also has Clone Projector, which is good at tanking damage, but it's obviously predictable. So it's a lot of tanking in the damage. And it's also really good because he can easily bait out his clone with if he drops his clone inside of his Lollipop gadget. It's going to be really good. So I'll put him in the B tier. I think I could see some good synergies with this. Next up, we have Gene. And Gene has two alright gadgets. He's got Lamp Blowout, which will give him healing, but also knock back the enemy. And then he's got Vengeful Spirits, which is good for chip damage, good on open maps. And Gene's biggest counter is pretty much aggression, because he has such a slow reload speed. Aggression and spawners. And at least with that, he has Lamp Blowout, which he can kind of protect himself with. And he also can chip damage the longer range brawlers with Vengeful Spirits. Now, it's very rare you're going to need both of these gadgets, but it will help him, so I'll put him in the C tier. Next up, we have Carl, and Carl has two pretty good gadgets. She's got Heat Ejector, which has received so many reworks, but is actually a decent gadget now because it deals a lot of damage, and then combine that with Flying Hook, you can play aggressive, throw Heat Ejector, and then throw your super, and you're going to deal extreme amounts of damage, because Carl does a lot of damage with his super and Heat Ejector and his main attack. If you spam out everything, you're going to delete pretty much every single brawler in the game. Even if they knock you out of your super, they're still going to take so much damage. So I'm going to put them in the A tier. Next up, we have Rosa. And Rosa has 2 gadgets that help each other, because you have Plant Life, which spawns bushes. She can use that 3 times to spawn a total of 27 extra bushes on the map, because it spawns a 3x3 bush. And then you've also got her other gadget. I don't remember what it's called, but it slows enemies that are in bushes. With Rosa spawning more bushes and then using her other gadget to slow enemies in bushes, it's a combination. Like, it's a good combo. On right maps with choke points that she can put her grass down, she's going to have so much control over the map, and she's going to be a very, very hard brawler to deal with. So I'm going to put this in the S tier. I absolutely see a broken synergy with 2 gadgets that can absolutely help each other. Next up, we have BB. And BB has a good gadget in Vitamin Booster, which gives her a lot of healing, but she also has one of the worst gadgets in the game with her Sticky Bubble, whatever the heck it's called, which is really bad because that gadget completely ruins her hypercharge. It doesn't split into 2 bubbles with that gadget active. And also, the gadget slow isn't that much. Like, sure, it'll help, but it completely ruins her hypercharge, which is why BB is good, is because of her hypercharge. So I have to put it in the F tier, because it makes her worse. Next up, we have Tick. And Tick has 2 decent gadgets. If you're not playing against anything aggressive, then you can use Mind Mania, and you're gonna have extra map control and can deal extra damage. But you also have Last Hurrah, which pretty much makes him super challenging to counter, along with his Tick head already, which is very, very strong. So Tick, I think combined-wise, at least in the B tier. Next up, we have 8-Bit, and 8-Bit has 2 pretty good gadgets. You know when to use them. You've got Cheat Cartridge, which teleports him right back to his turret, which majority of the time you want to do that to either play defensively in Gem Grab or play aggro in other game modes. And then in Heist, you have Extra Credits, which gives him 18 projectiles, and it can also shred people, shred tanks and stuff to pieces. And if you get that clip off, that's a lot of damage. So I'll put him in the B tier. Next up, we have Sandy, and I feel like nobody talks about his first gadget anymore. Like, his second gadget makes Sandy really strong because it helps him with his biggest counter, which is aggression. Sandy has no DPS, so he will literally just get countered by anything aggressive. But at least with his gadget, he can stun the enemy, and then if he's really low on HP, he can just pop his first gadget, heal back up to full HP, and go back aggressive. Honestly, think is such an underrated combo. Now, obviously, majority of the time, you don't use the first gadget because you really need the second gadget on Sandy. But at least in more passive game modes, he can use his first gadget while also having his second gadget available. So I'm going to put him in the A tier. Next up, we have Ems. And Ems obviously needs her knockback gadget. That's why having 2 gadgets is good. But Acid Spray, the fact that it can pierce through walls and pretty much guaranteed to throw the enemy off guard. And pretty much you want to use this gadget when the enemy has enough HP to die. So with the combination of both gadgets, you could be very sneaky with Ems and get some very, very crucial kills, especially in game modes like Hot Zone, Heist, and stuff like that, where you can just use her gadget to just throw the enemy off guard and pretty much kill them. So I'll put her on the B tier. Next up, we have B, and B has 2 alright gadgets. Like, they both have been nerfed, pretty much. We have Honey Molasses, which spawns a slow, which it's very good on choke points, but most of the time you use that gadget to just tank a shot. And then Rattle the Hive is good for pushing the enemy back and getting some chip damage. Now, it's really hard to hit those bees, and they don't do like an insane amount of damage, but it's good just to spam that gadget. So I'll give her C tier. I don't see much change in B. B's gadgets are kind of lackluster in my opinion. Next up, we have Max. And Max has 1 really good gadget in Phase Shifter and 1 not that good gadget in Sneaky Sneakers or whatever. I don't even remember what the gadget's called. But literally, she only most of the time, that tank, though, the tankiness from her phase shifter gadget is so good. And then her other gadget gives her healing, but it's just way too predictable. It only lasts for 3 seconds, and by the time you warp back to where you placed that gadget, somebody's probably waiting for you there and is going to delete you as soon as you teleport back. So I don't really see much change in Max. I'm putting her in the D tier. Next up, we have Mr. P. And Mr. P has 2 alright gadgets. Like, he can throw... Oh, actually, I don't know if this will work like that, but if you throw a Porter Reinforcement and then use the service bell, does that buff the Porter? Because if that's the case, it has to be at least the A tier, because back in when Porter Reinforcements was first released, it was insanely broken. Mr. P was so meta. And if that's the case, I would have to put it A tier at least, maybe even S tier. I don't know if that's how it works. I'm going to put it in the A tier because it does it to a Porter, and if Mr. P doesn't have a Porter from his actual super, it's going to buff the Porter Reinforcement one, and that is going to have a ton of HP. It's going to waste so much ammo, but I don't know if it'll work like that because the Porter Reinforcement one is smaller. If that is the case, though, it's S tier, but I'm only going to put it in the A tier just because I can't guarantee it'll work. Next up, we have Jackie, and Jackie has Pneumatic Booster, which is needed in her kit, and then Rebuild, which is too situational. It's not even a good gadget. It repairs basically nothing. So I'm putting her in the F tier. Her Rebuild gadget is good for Cheese. And Cheese, as you guys can tell in YouTube Shorts, Cheese doesn't work. It's friendly match games. Her Rebuild gadget is terrible. So it's going to be in the F tier. Next up, we have Sprout. And Sprout has 2 good gadgets. He's got Transplant, which will give us his wall back and then allow him to throw another wall. But then he also has Guarded Mulcher, which he can consume a bush and heal for, I think it's 2,000 HP. Like, it's basically a Bull's gadget, but Sprout is a lot more challenging to deal with, especially at long ranges where he plays. Like, you don't really run Sprout into aggression unless you're playing ladder, because Sprout is terrible against aggression. But against long range, he's good. So it's alright, though. I'll put him in the C tier. Next up, we have Gale. And Gale, the thing about Gale is I think both of his gadgets together would be so good, because on specific maps where you want Spring Ejector, you only want to use one. And then his other 2 gadgets are useless, because you don't really want to put down another Spring Ejector. You want to put that Spring Ejector into a spot where tanks or whoever can get from point A to point B much quicker, especially in game modes like Hot Zone or Heist, where you just want to keep shooting a tank into the zone or onto the heist safe. That's really good. And then you have the Twister gadget, which blocks off choke points for 5 seconds. So it's really good, A tier. Next up, we have my favorite brawler, Nani, and I think Nani could be actually really good with this, because you play Nani on the open maps, where on Heist, for example, you want to be using the teleport gadget. You want to be using Warp Blast to get on top of the heist safe. But Nani's biggest problem is her shots are so hard to hit. And if she's at another battle with another sharpshooter and she's going to get hit, she has Return to Sender to at least continue the fight or even confirm the kill on the other sharpshooter. And that's why I think the combination is really strong. It's not game-breaking by any means, so I'll put her in the B tier, but it's very powerful. Next up, we have Surge, and Surge has 2 gadgets, really good gadgets. He's got Power Surge, which gives him an extra level, which will be able to at least get him to level 2 and get him going. Because the biggest problem with Surge is right now he's actually very, very strong because he has Power Shield, which we'll get to that. But in past metas where Surge was not good, you had to use Power Surge to get to level 2. That's when you could start doing something, because level 1 Surge is awful. And with that Power Surge and Power Shield, he's going to be bursting out so much damage. It's insanity. So he's A tier at least. You could even say S tier. I wouldn't be upset if you put him in the S tier. Next up, we have Colette. And Colette, low-key, has 2 decent gadgets. Now, her first gadget is never used because her second gadget, Gotcha, is absolutely broken. The fact that it hasn't been nerfed, in my opinion, at all, is ridiculous to me. It's a ridiculously broken gadget. 80% healing for 5 seconds is a joke. And the biggest problem with Colette is confirming kills. So most of the time, you have to throw her super to confirm the kill, which Sure, whatever. Collect, it only takes 4 shots to hit her, to charge her super, and then if she's going to die, she can pop gotcha, bam, more healing. With her first gadget, she can use it and confirm the kill. She doesn't have to waste her super, and she can use her super on groups that are enemies, the high safe. I just think potentially it's game breaking, so I'll put her in the A tier. I don't think it's S tier. You could say S tier. I wouldn't be mad. Next up, we have Amber. And Amber's another brawler that has 2 really good gadgets. She has Fire Starters, which is a good gadget against longer range because she gets the speed boost and can at least close down the gap. And then Amber's biggest weakness is anything that out DPSs her, basically. So any aggro that jumps on her and Amber just doesn't have the DPS to output, she has Dancing Flames, which will delete the brawler that jumps on top of her. It is a great synergy. So A tier for me at least. Next up we have Lou. And Lou has a good gadget and an whatever gadget. His Ice Block gadget gives him immunity for 1 second. But he can't attack and he can't move for that second, which just leads him to be super vulnerable once he gets out of the gadget. And then his other gadget is good because anybody caught in his super takes freezing damage. Combine that with the Hypothermia Star Power, less damage output. And I'll give him C tier. Like, it's not really going to change Lou that much, but it'll help him a little bit. Next up, we have Byron. And Byron has 2 good gadgets. He's got Shot in the Arm, which gives him a lot of healing. And then Booster Shot, which gives him more DPS, but also healing to his teammates. So he has pretty much a survivability gadget and a defense gadget, which Byron gets destroyed by aggression. But if he can use that super and heal himself, he's really going to never die. So I'm going to put him in the A tier. Really good combination with Byron gadgets. Next up, we have Edgar. And Edgar has a really needed gadget with Let's Fly because he needs a super. Otherwise, Edgar is dog crap without a super. And then if he jumps in with his super, he at least has a gadget that gives him more survivability. So you would kind of have to use both gadgets simultaneously. And then eventually he'll get his hypercharge where he really doesn't need either of his gadget or his super because he can just chain super so quickly. So I think it'll be good, though. Edgar will have a lot more survivability, especially when he can actually have super, jump on the enemy, and then use his gadget for defense. Next up, we have Ruffs, and Ruffs has 2 pretty good gadgets. He's got 1 gadget, which helps him against his counters, which is DPS, and it's really good against brawlers like Surge, Stu, Maisie, brawlers with those single projectiles that he can just use the sandbag to tank. But then he also has his other gadget, which Air Support, which literally just pushes the enemy back. Like, it's good for map control, and you just want to spam that gadget relentlessly. It's going to be very hard to counter Ruffs, so I'm going to put him in the B tier. Next up, we have Stu. And Stu has 2 pretty good gadgets as well. He's got Speed Zone, which is good for himself and his teammates, and on certain maps where he can put that gadget in a safe spot where it's really not going to die. The team is pretty much going to benefit from a speed boost the whole time. And then he also has Breakthrough, which is good at making just aggro plays and opening up a couple key spots on the map. I could see Stu being very strong, so I'll put him in the B tier as well. Next up, we have Belle. And Belle also has 2 pretty good gadgets. You've got Nest Egg, which is good for the slow, and also for a little bit of chip damage. But also, if anybody gets hit by that gadget, they're pretty much going to die. And then Reverse Polarity is good for making very crucial plays or getting the bounce started because it's a very unpredictable gadget that has a pretty long range. It's not by any means a great gadget, but at least will help Belle. So another brawler I'll throw on the B tier. Next up, we have Squeak. And Squeak has Residue, one of the best gadgets in the game. It's pretty much Gale's gadget, but pretty much the same thing. So it's a choke point on the map for like 5 seconds. And then you also have his wind-up gadget, which I feel like nobody talks about because Residue just is just way better. But he can throw that thing across the map, but it also deals extra damage. So if Squeak's being attacked by aggro, he can at least pop the wind-up gadget and deal a bit of extra damage just to give him a chance. So I'll also put him in the B tier. Next up, we have Buzz. And Buzz has Reserve Buoy, which is so good with its hypercharge. But then he also has X-Ray Shades on maps with a lot of grass. It's such an underrated gadget because it lasts for 12 seconds. And he can pretty much scout an entire field of grass. It's really good because then he can just unexpectedly super onto a brawler and play a little bit passive-aggressive, basically. So another brawler it's kind of too map dependent with Buzz, so I'm going to put him in the C tier just because of it, but it's still really good. Next up, we have Griff. Poor Griff. I'm so sorry, Griff. You have to be in the F tier because you have Piggy Bank, which is a good gadget, but your other gadget sucks. Like, it gives him 3 extra coins, which, yeah. Oh, sure, more damage. The chance of you hitting those coins, besides on a hide save, is bare minimal. Like, you're not going to hit those new coins. It's just a bad gadget. Next up, we have Ash, and Ash has low-key 2 not-so-great gadgets. He's got Chill Pill, which gives him a good amount of healing, but it takes away all of his rage. And if he can't build his rage back up with his rats, because most of the time when you use that gadget, you use it when his rats are about to hit an enemy, because his rats will build his rage back up. But majority of the time, that's a failure, because Ash right now is so bad. And then Rotten Banana, yeah, sure, it gives him rage, but it takes away his HP. And most of the time, you don't want to do that. So, like, it's really not going to change Ash. I'm going to put him in the D tier. It'll help him ever so slightly. Next up, we have Meg. And Meg has 2 alright gadgets. One gives her healing, one gives her a tankiness. And honestly, the Meg's toolbox, you don't use it for its intended purpose. Like, it's supposed to give her reload speed. Most of the time, you use it to just tank the attack. So, honestly, it won't change Meg that much. I'll put her in the D tier. Next up, we have Lola. And Lola has a good gadget in Freeze Frame, and then her other one, Stunt Double, which swaps her ego and herself. Like, it gives a decent amount of healing, but most of the time, I would say it's actually not a bad gadget. Like, it's going to be a lot of healing, because what you could do is you could throw her ego in a spot to tank damage, and then eventually switch it. Use the value from the shield with the Kiss Star power. I actually see some good synergies with Lola's gadget, so I'm actually going to put it in the B tier, because I could see some game-changing plays with it. Next up, we have Grom, and Grom has 2 actually decent gadgets. He's kind of in the same suit with Buzz, because one of his gadgets really only good on grassy maps, and his other gadget's good for DPS, so, like, it'll help, but it's too situational to be anywhere higher than C tier. Next up, we have Fang. And Fang has 2 alright gadgets. He's got Roundhouse Kick, which pretty much makes Fang a very strong assassin brawler, because he can just super attack, gadget attack, without being pretty much hit. And then he also has Corn Fu, which deals a lot of damage, and it's good for map control. So, they're not like crazy good gadgets by any means, but they're good. So I'll give them C tier. Next up we have Eve. We don't really need to talk. Eve has arguably the worst gadget in the game in Motherly Love. It makes her super worse. So, Eve will not benefit at all. End of story there. Next up, we have Janet. And Janet has 2 alright gadgets. Her drop the base gadget is good for scouting, it's good for chip damage, and it's just good for preventing the enemy from healing back up, which is a very strong gadget. And then her backstage pass gadget, god dang, I can't English today, is very, very good at countering throwers, but also defending herself, because she can hop over a wall, because her biggest counter is aggression. But if she doesn't have her super, she can at least pop her gadget and shoot herself back, and even over a wall, to pretty much protect herself. So, good synergy here. I'll put her in the B tier. Next up we have Bonnie. And Bonnie has Sugar Rush, one of the best gadgets in the game, and Crash Test, one of the worst gadgets in the game. However, with both gadgets, she'll at least have a gadget in both forms, and Crash Test does a lot of damage, so it'll help Bonnie pretty much confirm the kill, guaranteed, when she's out of cannon form. So, might surprise a couple of you guys. I'm actually going to put it in the B tier, because Crash Test does a lot of damage. It's just that it was almost never used, because Bonnie needs the Sugar Rush gadget. Next up, we have Otis. Poor Otis. Otis has one of the worst gadgets in the game in Dormant Star. It is such a bad gadget that I don't even know if it works half the time. Next up, we have Sam. Oh, another brawler with a gadget that's so bad. He's got 2 gadgets that completely contradict each other. One gadget pulls enemies towards his super, which is awesome. The other gadget knocks enemies away from his super. Why would you want to do that? And also, you have to pop that gadget before you even throw your super, which makes even less sense. So, absolutely terrible. Next up, we have Gus. And Gus is underrated one, in my opinion, because he has a Soul Switcher gadget, which will give him a ghost. And if the enemy threshold is in Cookie Popper range, he can pop Soul Switcher, then throw his attack. If he hits the enemy, he can immediately pop Cookie Popper and guarantee the kill every single time. underrated build in my opinion, and it's only for 5% of Gus's HP, which is nothing, so I'm not worried. So I'm going to put it in the 8th tier. Could be a very deadly combination. Next up we have Buster, and Buster has two pretty good gadgets. Most of the time you use slow-mo replay because it's so good of a gadget. You can pull the enemy in and confirm the kill. But nobody talks about his other gadget. His other gadget, when he's paired up with his other teammates, actually gives a decent amount of healing. It's not like crazy by any means, but it's good for synergy. So I'll put it in the B tier. And most of the time when you play Buster, you want to stand by at least one teammate and benefit from his trait. Next up we have Gray. And Gray has two gadgets that pretty much are designed on opening up the map. His walking cane gadget is so good because not only can he make plays with it, he can pull the enemy in, which pretty much guarantees a kill almost every single time if they're below the 4,600 threshold. And then his other gadget is so good for opening up the map, at least. Now, it's not as big as what it was when it came out, but it's still a gadget that can open up the map. And good synergies can lead very long-range archetypes to completely dominate, so I'll put him in the B tier. Next up, we have Mandy. And Mandy has two pretty good gadgets. One gadget counters her counters, which is aggression, obviously. And then her other gadget throws the enemy so off guard. It's not that hard to hit the Cookie Crumbs gadget. And not only can you confirm kills, but you can also charge your super from it. And pretty much guarantee another kill because Mandy's super only takes 4 shots to get. And it's not that hard to hit if you know how to use it. So I will put her in the B tier. Next up, we have Chester. And Chester is a bit RNG, so I don't know how to rank Chester because his first gadget changes his super, and most of the time, Chester, I would say 3 of 5, I would say Chester only really has one bad super, and that's his Pop Rocks. It deals like no damage, but his other supers, they're alright, but most of the time, you want to, depending on the archetype you're playing against, there is a specific super you're looking for, which is why having that gadget is nice, but you also have the other gadget, which will give him a nice stat boost. And now it's random, and you have no idea what the heck it's going to be. But sometimes, if you get the right one, you can make the right plays. But it's just too RNG for me, so I have to put it, the highest I can put is C tier. Next up, we have RT. And RT, low-key, could be, I'm going to put him in the S tier. And let me tell you why. Because RT, out of line, is one of the best gadgets in the game. Because RT's biggest counter, really, is you would just have to overwhelm him before he got his super. With this gadget, you pretty much can't go in and play aggression. So RT is just the most flexible brawler because he has his Hacks gadget, which is really good against long-range brawlers because you hit them 1-2 times and then pop the gadget, pretty much a guaranteed kill every single time. And then out of line, anything aggressive, you have to just put super down, delete them, and then you can go back. Like, it's just so, how the heck are you going to counter him? Like, he just has so many ways to just counter everything. So, I have to put him in the S tier. Next up, we have Willow. And Willow has two just gadgets. Like, the first gadget makes all of her damage go out in one output. Her second gadget gives her lose gadget, basically. But it lasts for 2 seconds. And also, she's under. So, I think I don't know. C tier? I don't really know. That's really not going to change that much. Next up, we have Maisie. And Maisie has the good combination gadget with her super, but then also her other gadget against tanks is really good. It gives her an extra ammo. And then also, depending on their threshold, pretty much is going to do like an insane amount of damage. But I just think that second gadget is too complicated to use. And also, Maisie's shots are super hard to hit, so majority of the time you're never going to hit that gadget anyways, so the highest I can go is C tier. Next up we have Hank, and Hank is, I don't really know. His first gadget slows the brawler for 3 seconds if you hit the balloon, which most of the time you will hit it, but you kind of throw it around a wall, and then you also have the shield tank. I don't know. Hank's just a brawler. Who cares? I'll put him in the C tier. Next up, we have Cordelius. And Cordelius has two really good gadgets. He's got Replanting, which is so versatile because he can jump a terrain, pretty much counter everything. The only way to counter Cordelius was with range. And by having this, he can make plays. He can counter tanks. He can counter throwers. He can pretty much dominate the whole map. And then also, he has his Poison Shroom. So if he's going against an aggro that out DPSs him, he can at least throw down the Poison Shroom gadget and pretty much win that 1v1 almost every single time. So the versatility is there. So I'm going to give Cordelius the A tier. Next up, we have Doug, and if Doug wasn't such a bad brawler, I could see a bit potential here, because the way you play Doug is you could play both passive-aggressive, or he can heal up his teammates using extra mustard, but if anything aggressive is coming at him, or he wants to play a little bit aggro himself, he has double sausage is the healing one, and then extra mustard is the damage one. So he could use double sausage to heal, and then extra mustard for DPS. So the synergy is there, but since Doug is a bad brawler, the highest I can go is C tier, because he's really only going to benefit from one gadget. Next up, we have Pearl. Unfortunately for Pearl, she has whatever the heck her second gadget's called that heals her teammates. Absolutely a horrendous gadget. Next up, we have Chuck. And Chuck has two whatever gadgets. His first gadget is good against in Heist, because he could throw down his post at closer to the safe, take his gadget back, and then, that's not, I mixed it up. He can super onto the furthest post, use his gadget, then throw his post onto the safe. But otherwise, you don't really need that gadget, because majority of the time, you're going to put the post in the right spot. And then his other gadget just gives him the ability to go through walls. Whatever. D tier, I don't think Chuck really benefits from his gadgets that much. Next up, we have Charlie, and Charlie has two really good gadgets. She has the Spider's gadget, which is good for tanking, and was one of the best. It's been nerfed a lot, so it's nowhere near as good as it used to be. But then she also has her other gadget, which I don't remember what it's called, but it gives her a lot of healing, and it's underrated as hell. Nobody talks about it enough. So, honestly, I'm going to put it in the A tier. It could even be S tier, because it's just a lot of healing. Next up, we have Miko's. And Miko's gadgets are pretty good. I use Presto most of the time, because it's just easier for me. Like, you don't really need the chipping scream the way I play Miko. But it's good to have a gadget that gives his attack a little bit of extra range, but then also another gadget which gives him a little bit of extra damage, because Miko's biggest problem is his reload speed is so slow. So the fact that he can at least jump on to the brawler and pretty much guarantee the hit, and then start repeatedly jumping, and then give a little bit of extra damage to confirm that kill, at least gives him some versatility. So I'll put him in the B tier. Next up, we have Kit. And Kit has two really good gadgets. They both have been nerfed a lot, but they're still really good gadgets. Cardboard Box gives him Leon Super pretty much, and then Cheeseburger is really good when paired onto a tank, and pretty much any brawler. That healing he gets is insane. It's two gadgets. He can play aggressive, and he can play passive. Two gadgets that'll pretty much help him the whole time. Next up, we have Larry and Laurie, and unfortunately, they have to be F tier, which is very rare for Larry and Laurie, because they're such mechanically broken brawlers. But the biggest problem is their order swap gadget. Their first gadget, I don't know, I think it's called order swap. I don't remember what their second gadget's called, the one that gives them the heal. That's the better gadget. Their first gadget, where they swap the weapons, is terrible, because Laurie's weapon, Laurie is used for chip damage. Larry has the main attack that is absolutely broken, and you don't want to switch the gadget ever, because you want the thrower form. You don't want to do the shotgun, because the shotgun actually deals less damage than the thrower. So why the heck would you want to change it? You wouldn't. Next up, we have Angelo. And Angelo has two pretty good gadgets. He's got one gadget which kind of helps him against his biggest counter, which is aggression, because Angelo lacks the DPS, because if he misses his 4K shot, anybody could just play aggressive. But he has his gadget which heals him up a little bit, but it has a humongous knockback, so he can easily escape without hesitation. And then his other gadget is literally Mandy's gadget, and if they can throw the enemies so off guard, and with the poison tick, that's 6,000 damage with a click of a green button right there if he hits it, which Angelo's shots, they're not that hard to hit. So I see really good potential here. I'll put it in the B tier. Next up, we have one of my favorite brawlers, Melody. And Melody's first gadget, or I think it's her first gadget. I don't even know, because I never use it. The one that makes her notes orbit at a larger radius is low-key terrible, because it's honestly harder to hit the notes, because the way you play Melody is you kind of just get right up and personal in the enemy's face. And then same thing in Heist. You don't really need her notes to orbit further. You really want the shield. So honestly, I think this won't help her at all. I'm putting her in the F tier. Next up, we have Lily. And sure, yes, you'll have both gadgets. Vanish gadget, one of the best gadgets in the game. Easily. Probably the best gadget in the whole game. It's such a broken gadget because the fact that she can go in the Shadow Realm and progress how she likes, but her other gadget is not horrible. Like, I've hated it in the past. But if you need a super over a wall, and even if you miss the super, at least with the repot gadget, she will land wherever her super is. And it's not that hard to hit Lily's super, especially over a wall. Like, she can easily make a couple plays. So honestly, I'm going to put it in the B tier. I actually see a decent potential. Next up we have Draco. And Draco has his gadget, which gives him the extra life, basically, which is a gadget that I don't know how the heck got added into the game, but it's a really good gadget. And then his other gadget just knocks the enemy upwards and pulls them. Like, whatever, who cares? I'll put him in the D tier, but just because I don't think that first gadget's really not going to change anything about him. Next up, we have Barry. And Barry has a gadget, which is really good because it helps him against his biggest counter, which is aggression, obviously, as a thrower, because he can heal himself and his teammates and also knock the enemy back. But his other gadget is really good in Heist because his attack lasts for double. And imagine throwing that in a choke point, especially on a game mode like Hot Zone. That thing is going to be there for 12 seconds, and the enemy's going to have to walk through it at some point. So, I'll put him in the, it's just C tier. C tier, I think, is the fairest spot. Next up, we have Clancy, and Clancy absolutely needs his token gadget, because the fact that he gets double tokens allows him to progress through his levels so much faster. And then his other gadget gives him a dash, which will allow him to get in range, but also gives him an ammo back, so he'll at least be able to chip down and benefit from his other gadget a lot. So, synergy-wise, it's really strong. So, I'll put him in the B tier. Next up, we have Mo. And Mo has his gadget, which gives him faster supercharge rate, which is a good gadget, because Mo pretty much needs to get in his super. Well, he doesn't need to, because his main attack is just mechanically really strong as well. And then his other gadget allows him to dash through a wall with his super and break terrain, which I don't really see it being that great, but it's alright. So, I'll put him in the C tier. And lastly, we have Kenji. Kenji has his first gadget, which is never used because his second gadget is so broken. The fact that he heals 50% of the damage he takes from the past, I think it's 3 seconds. It's 3 or 5 seconds. I don't remember. And then he can also become a sneaky assassin by literally only using his dash. He can make plays. But I don't really think his first gadget is that good. His second gadget is insanely broken. But I think both of them, like B tier, is the highest I'm going to go. But yeah. That's the tier list right there. Let me know in the comments, agree, disagree, and also let me know in the comments your other suggestions for video ideas, because like I said in the beginning of this video, this was another video suggestion. But yeah, that is it for this tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.